Tren de Aragua cartel launched its largest convoy across the desert. At first, it looked like U.S. forces had no chance of stopping it. But what happened in the next 30 minutes shocked everyone watching and changed the entire balance of the fight against Venezuela's most dangerous cartel. At exactly 1:45 p.m., under the open sky, a massive convoy of the Tren de Aragua cartel rolled across a desert road. More than 300 vehicles stretched in a long column, their headlights cutting thin beams into the sand and rock. Trucks carried fighters armed with RPG-7s, PKM machine guns, and belt-fed DSHK heavy weapons mounted on pickup trucks. Other vehicles carried Zu-23 autocannons welded onto the backs of technicals, creating mobile anti-air platforms. To the cartel, this was more than a movement of fighters. It was a display of confidence. They believed they could cross undetected, linking routes between Venezuela and partner smuggling networks deeper into Central America. They believed no one would dare touch them in the open desert. But they were wrong. The convoy was not moving blind. Intelligence had followed every step. U.S. reconnaissance satellites from the National Reconnaissance Office had tracked them from staging points connected back to Venezuela, where Tren de Aragua first rose to power. MQ-9 Reaper drones shadowed them from high altitude, sending real-time video to U.S. command posts. The convoy thought the desert's emptiness meant safety, but to U.S. forces it was the perfect kill zone. Wide open, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Cartel leaders inside armored SUVs barked orders over radios, confident in their firepower. They had fought local police and militias before. They had survived clashes with Venezuelan security forces, often bribing officials or overpowering them with raw numbers. But this was not Venezuela. This was a battlefield watched and prepared by the United States military. As the convoy crossed deeper into its route, the stage was set. SEAL teams were already in position. Hidden in ridgelines overlooking the convoy's path, snipers with Mk-13 Mod 7 rifles lay prone, their scopes locked on the lead vehicles. Each sniper had coordinates pre-calculated. Beside them, spotters tracked wind and distance, waiting for the command. The desert was quiet, only the faint rumble of engines carrying across the night. Every second brought the convoy closer into range. At 1:52 p.m., the order came. Open fire. Crack after crack echoed across the desert as 300 Winchester Magnum rounds punched through the first vehicles. Tires exploded, engines caught fire, and the convoy's lead elements ground to a halt. The desert road became a wall of smoke and flames. Immediately, electronic warfare teams activated jammers, cutting the cartel's radios into static. Panic spread as fighters shouted over dead frequencies, unable to coordinate. Within moments, the convoy's confidence shattered. The fighters realized they were not ambushing. They were the ones trapped. What looked like an easy drive through the desert had turned into the beginning of their destruction. And this was only the first strike. The real hammer was still waiting above. The ambush had only begun. While the lead vehicles burned on the road, U.S. command centers thousands of miles away watched everything unfold in real time. The convoy was never moving freely. For days, intelligence satellites had tracked every assembly point, every fuel stop, and every vehicle leaving Venezuelan staging grounds before crossing into international smuggling routes. Analysts at the National Reconnaissance Office and Central Command had pieced together the picture. This was not a small unit, but one of the largest Tren de Aragua movements outside of Venezuela. Trucks loaded with ammunition, crates of smuggled rifles, RPG tubes, and bundles of narcotics rolled side by side with heavily armed technicals. The column stretched for miles, a perfect target glowing in infrared against the cold desert floor. By 2:10 p.m., confirmation came from multiple drones. MQ-9 Reapers circled high, their sensors marking every heat signature, tagging every vehicle with digital identifiers. An RQ-4 Global Hawk at even higher altitudes scanned the region, ensuring no escape routes remained undetected. To the cartel, their headlights made them look like predators cutting across the night. To U.S. forces, those headlights outlined a trail straight into a kill zone. SEAL sniper teams fired again, dropping more vehicles in the center of the convoy to trap them between burning wrecks. Cartel fighters scrambled out, spraying fire wildly with PKM machine guns and 7.62 2mm rifles, but they were firing into empty ridges, blinded by jammers and night. SEALs had already shifted position, moving silently with night vision goggles and suppressed rifles, unseen but deadly. That was when the sky above came alive. At 20,000 feet, a pair of F-15E Strike Eagles locked onto the rear elements of the convoy. Their targeting pods glowed as coordinates fed in from drones. At 2:15 p.m., the first strike fell. GBU-38J dams detached and dropped silently before erupting into massive fireballs. Fuel tankers exploded in a chain reaction, sending shockwaves down the desert valley. Entire clusters of cartel vehicles were engulfed in flames within seconds. Panic took hold. Surviving drivers tried to swerve off the road, scattering into the open sand. But the desert betrayed them. Wide, flat, and exposed, every vehicle became an easy mark. Seconds later, the iconic roar of a 10C Warthogs cut through the night. Flying low and fast, their GAU-8 Avenger cannons unleashed streams of 30mm shells. Trucks, technicals, and armored SUVs were ripped apart under withering fire. Survivors leapt out, running into the dark, but the crosshairs never left them. Inside the convoy, chaos reigned. Commanders shouted over dead radios, trying to rally fighters into counterattacks. Some tried to bring Zu-23 autocannons to bear against the sky, spraying tracers upward in desperation. But the aircraft were too fast, too high, and too precise. Their firepower was no match for the layered assault. At ground level, SEAL teams triggered pre-placed C4 charges along choke points. Explosions tore apart more vehicles, forcing the convoy deeper into the narrow desert road where escape was impossible. Fighters trapped in the center could only watch as burning wrecks ahead and behind sealed their fate. The ambush was total. What Tren de Aragua thought was a bold movement across international routes had turned into a death march. The desert, empty and unforgiving, was now their graveyard. And the U.S. strike was only entering its second phase. By 2:27 p.m., the convoy was in full collapse. The desert sky was glowing with flames, every explosion lighting up the terrain for miles. But the ambush had been designed for exactly this moment, when panic pushed the cartel fighters to fight back, to charge into the trap instead of retreating. Tren de Aragua was no small gang. These were men hardened in the barrios of Venezuela, veterans of brutal street wars, now armed with Russian and Chinese weapons. They were desperate, cornered, and convinced they could blast their way out. The first counterattack came fast. Surviving fighters dismounted from armored SUVs and began firing RPG-29s into the ridges. The warheads exploded against rock outcroppings, sending shards of stone flying, but the SEAL teams had already moved to flanking positions. Their suppressed HK-416 rifles cracked in short bursts, each shot precise, each fighter dropping before they could reload. Still, the volume of fire was massive. Heavy DSHK machine guns opened up from technicals, their 12.7mm rounds stitching the sand in long, glowing arcs. Cartel gunners tried to suppress the ridges, hoping to give cover for the vehicles pushing forward. That was when the second layer of the kill zone activated. From beyond the horizon, M777 howitzers thundered, firing coordinated volleys of 155mm shells. The rounds fell in tight patterns, blasting the desert road in front of the convoy and sealing off the path. Every explosion sent shockwaves into the ground, overturning vehicles, scattering fighters, and cutting off any thought of a breakout. To the cartel, it felt like the earth itself had turned against them. But the fight wasn't over. Determined to rally, a column of armored SUVs mounted with heavy turrets roared forward through the flames. Dust clouds billowed behind them as the drivers slammed the throttles, determined to smash through SEAL positions. It was a gamble born of desperation. For a moment, it looked like they might overrun the ambush. Then the sound of rotor blades filled the air. Two AH-64 Apache gunships swept low over the valley. Their 30mm chain guns opened up, ripping through the armored SUVs as though they were paper. Rockets streaked from their hardpoints, detonating in the middle of the convoy. Survivors were shredded before they could fire another shot. The armored thrust that Tren de Aragua had gambled on ended in smoking craters. Still, pockets of resistance fought on. Fighters huddled behind burning wrecks, firing blindly at shadows in the ridges. Others tried to bring out manpads, hoping to lock onto the Apaches or A-10s. But electronic warfare units had already jammed their targeting systems. The missiles never launched. Every attempt to fight back was met with overwhelming precision. On the ground, the SEAL squads began pushing closer, their NVGs glowing green as they advanced step by step. Flashbangs cracked inside disabled trucks, stunning fighters before suppressed bursts dropped them where they stood. Several high-value lieutenants were captured alive, dragged out of hiding as the chaos consumed their men. The ambush was no longer just about destroying the convoy. It was about dismantling the cartel's leadership. By now, the convoy was little more than a graveyard of twisted steel and burning fuel. Every vehicle trapped in the valley was either destroyed or abandoned. The survivors who hadn't been captured were running blindly into the desert flats, scattering without direction, their radios silent, their command structure shattered. Tren de Aragua had entered the kill zone in force. Now they were nothing more than survivors fleeing for their lives, and the most devastating strike had yet to begin. By 3:05 p.m., the battlefield had gone from chaos to total destruction. The once massive convoy of 300 vehicles was reduced to twisted wreckage, fires still burning across the desert floor. But U.S. command wasn't finished. The kill zone was designed not only to trap, but to erase every possible escape. Overhead, B-52 bombers entered the airspace, their massive silhouettes invisible in the haze, but their payloads unmistakable. AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles released from their wings streaked toward the desert's exit points. Each explosion sealed a road, collapsing bridges, cratering dirt tracks, and ensuring that no surviving vehicle could ever regroup. The convoy wasn't just defeated, it was erased from the map. Drone footage from RQ-20 Puma UAVs confirmed the scale of the devastation. Entire lines of trucks were nothing but burning skeletons. Armored SUVs that once carried cartel leaders were split apart by precision fire. Fuel tankers still burned in towering fireballs, their smoke columns visible from miles away. The survivors scattered in every direction, but none made it far. Bayraktar drones swooped low, marking retreating fighters for airstrikes. F-15E Strike Eagles dove again, dropping precision-guided bombs onto clusters of men and vehicles. In less than 20 minutes, every pocket of resistance had been destroyed. For the Navy SEALs, the fight shifted from ambush to cleanup. Moving with precision, they advanced through the smoldering wrecks, clearing vehicles one by one. Suppressed rifles cracked as isolated fighters tried to fire back. Others, dazed and burned, surrendered with their hands raised, begging for mercy. Among those captured were high-value lieutenants directly tied to Tren de Aragua's operations inside Venezuela. Intelligence teams immediately began pulling data from seized radios and laptops, confirming that the convoy had been part of a larger plan to move drugs, weapons, and fighters north. What had started as a tactical ambush had now turned into a strategic intelligence windfall. The results were staggering. Over 200 vehicles destroyed, more than 400 cartel fighters either killed or captured, massive stockpiles of drugs and weapons seized before they could ever reach their destinations, and most shocking of all, 0 U.S. casualties. For the SEALs and Air Force crews, it was proof that American coordination, technology, and planning could wipe out even the largest threats with ruthless efficiency. But the message stretched far beyond the battlefield. For Tren de Aragua, it was a crippling blow. The Venezuelan-born cartel, which had grown into one of the most feared transnational groups in the hemisphere, had just lost its largest single operation. Its fighters lay dead in the desert, its vehicles burned, its leaders captured. For a cartel that thrived on fear, the image of their destruction would spread faster than any propaganda they could create. In Caracas, whispers spread instantly. If this could happen in the desert, what would stop the U.S. from repeating it closer to the cartel's strongholds inside Venezuela? For Moscow and Havana, both of whom had quietly tolerated Tren de Aragua's growth as a destabilizing force in the region, the message was equally clear. The United States had drawn a red line, and crossing it came with annihilation. And for Washington, this was more than just another operation. It was a statement to every enemy, whether cartel, insurgent, or foreign sponsor. When Navy SEALs and the Air Force strike together, no one survives. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a demonstration of overwhelming power, a reminder that technology, planning, and precision would always crush chaos and numbers. For Tren de Aragua, the desert wasn't a battlefield. It was their graveyard.